Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast. I'm Kelly Street, your host and owner of Happy Rebel. It's my mission to explore the authentic stories and wisdom from creators, entrepreneurs, and holistic life seekers like myself. Join me as we challenge societal norms, create room for growth, and connect with the people and the stories that can empower us on our path to becoming happy rebels. Get ready to be inspired and armed with practical tools to navigate your unique journey. Connect with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. This is the Happy Rebel podcast, where we embrace the dark and the light. Close or rest your eyes gently and take a deep cleansing breath. Inhale deeply, and as you exhale, release any tension or distractions. As you breathe in, envision a bright light infusing you with clarity, purpose, and intention. With each exhale, let go of anything that no longer serves you on this journey. In this space, we acknowledge the duality of life, the light and the dark, the challenges and the triumphs. We acknowledge that growth often comes from rebellion against the ordinary. As you continue to breathe deeply, know that you are not alone on this path. With gratitude for this moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes or come back to the space, ready to embark on this podcast journey. Hello, Morgan.
Hello.
I am so excited to have you here and to have you share your power and your wisdom and your journey that you've been on with everybody here. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody what you want them to know about you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be connecting with you and your community. My name is Morgan. I am at this moment, and it shifts and changes, but death and soul doula. I do death work and feel deeply called to shedding new light on what that transition looks like and bringing ritual and ceremony back to that space. And then I also am deeply passionate about working with our own internal death and rebirth that we go through. So, working specifically with women in tapping into their gifts and their power and getting out of their own way and releasing stories so that they can embody that. And I do that through many different modalities, but I work a lot and closely with the Akashic Records and different somatic practices and sometimes plant essences and host sacred sisterhood retreats a couple times a year as well.
Yeah. And I will say that is how I know you is because, well, first of all, just you were, given to me as this like beautiful gift of a suggestion on Instagram and just followed you and your work for a while. And then when I saw that you were doing this women's retreat, I was like, yes, that is for me. That is what I need right now. And I have to thank you so much for doing that and for doing the work that you do, because I'm going to get emotional. I am getting emotional here. Is your, one of the gifts that you bring to the world is this women supporting women and really, truly supporting other women and holding them and guiding them through their difficult times. And that is such a gift, and it's something I felt and I received. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. I mean, it takes all of us to be a part of that. And I just love those spaces and containers and getting to share in that with more and more and more women who say yes to it. So thank you as well.
Yeah. I have to ask you, as part of this, I suppose, did you have to work through any of your own blocks or barriers to be able to get there to the place where you could truly hold space for other women? Because I think, culturally we have a little bit of this thing where it's like, yeah, women support women, but there is a lot of backstabbing, or there is a lot of fear and scarcity that comes in behind those spaces. And
Mhm.
I didn't feel any of that at the retreat, and I don't feel any of that with you. So
Mm.
did you have some work to do to get there, or were you already there?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I often say that, I've been hurt more by women in my life than by men. But a big piece of that is my own story and abandonment from my mother.
Yeah.
And so it was part of my path was to really face that piece of being hurt by the feminine, and there was a lot that goes into that, even with my mom putting my sister and I against each other at a young age. So there was kind of already this built-in um, separation or comparison. And I think um, a big part of me healing through that was in my mid 20s. I fell in love with a woman for the first time, and it like helped me to really deeply heal that in a way that um, I didn't even know I needed at the time, which I guess is usually how that works. Um, and then I was at a women's retreat, and one of the biggest edges for me being there was part of that being in a small space with 30 women for a whole weekend. And so I had to sit with that, or I sat with that. And uh, one of the women there, Mary, who you also met, she said these words to me. We were going around the circle, or she said it to the group, and everyone was going around saying, like, what is the piece that they're there that weekend to heal around sisterhood, and like, how they've been hurt. And Mary said, I don't have any wounds with my sisters. I love women, and I love to support women, and I love to be around women. And hearing that that was even possible just was like, I want that too. And it was almost just the permission slip from that. And um, for me, it's been feeling safe to be vulnerable with women and to have deep conversations with them. And Spirit just started to bring the right people into my life. And it was rocky at first. Because of my abandonment wound, I was typically the friend that when things got hard, I would just dip out. And it's okay,
Yeah.
I'll just find a new friend, because it was easier to run away from it than to face it. Um, and now, there's sort of um, just kind of an energetic boundary that I have with any of my relationships, but women in particular, of as long as we're both willing to come to that relationship, willing to take responsibility for ourselves, like I know that it gets to just continue to deepen and deepen and deepen, and that there's so much magic in that. And um, as we started to then host these retreats, my female relationships and friendships have changed. I mean, I can't even begin to explain it. And some of my friends who have been friends with for 15 or 20 years, we're in a deeper, more vulnerable, intimate space in our friendship than we've ever been. And it's because of this work. It's because of how other women have taught me to dismantle the hierarchy or the comparison, and that we all have these really beautiful, sacred gifts to bring to one another. And it makes me emotional thinking about it too, of just, it feels like a deep remembering of being in tribe or community
Yeah.
where we're all there to do it together, and we all hold a piece to the puzzle, and it was never meant to be something that we do alone and have to figure out by ourselves. And that when you bring your piece and I bring my piece and she brings her piece, like that's how we accomplish whatever it is that we're working towards.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. Okay, so I have to tell you, you I'm sure everybody at the retreat, felt some version of this, or they were in their own space and they weren't even thinking about me. But I walked in to, came up to the house, and I went into such a really kind of this dissociative state of
Mm.
of just complete overwhelm. It was like deer in headlights, but really, honestly, I was just kind of became a child again, and had such a hard time being present with so many women, and so many women who
Mhm.
were like comfortable in their bodies and were like just, there and sharing and being so present and being with each other, that I kind of disappeared into myself for a little while. And it really, that weekend was such a transformative experience, because I think I came out of that really having grown up and having shed some layers of pain and some layers of childhood hurts, that I really truly did kind of age over that weekend, going from being
Mhm.
like such a little girl to, kind of stepping into more of a woman phase by the end.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think with Unbound, which is the space that you're in particular, it's kind of set up for that, you know?
Yeah.
It has a very, like, I see it as can be this initiation from either maiden to mother or child to, right, whatever step we are in the process, it
Yeah.
seems to be a next sort of rite of passage into that and helps us to really step into what that is that we're calling in.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that kind of, when you talk about these births and deaths and these phases of life that we
Mm.
go through, can you explain that a little bit more? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I bringing like you right the physical death work into it or just our own metaphorical deaths that we go through. um I deeply resonate with the idea of impermanence and that nothing is permanent, right? And we're always in a state of shift or change or transition. And when we go through these death cycles, it can be a death of an old version of ourself. It can be a death of a relationship. It can be, something that triggers us into this process. And it can look and be many different things. And sometimes it's long and it feels like we're stuck in that birthing process for a long time. And other times it might just be a little window. But yeah, I think that for anyone who's navigating any sort of awakening or walking a path of trying to understand themselves or working to understand themselves more deeply, it's in the honoring of um, shedding, releasing, and stepping into, new self. Or I often think of it as shedding and releasing to come back to who we've always
Mhm.
been. Really letting go of the external armor and things that we've covered ourselves up with. Um, I was just reading something yesterday too around this of it was reflecting on, you know, all of the past versions of ourself and like how does it feel to have let them go or to have died to those versions. And
Mhm.
the response was, "Oh, she's still here," and I hug her and say thank you every morning, or along those lines. And um, I think that's important too, right? If we're letting go of an old version of self, it's not fully and completely that they're gone forever. It's the graduation into this next version, and that part of us still exists, but the more awakened or aware version gets to be running the show from that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I use internal family systems therapy with my therapy clients, and then like do that work myself, and I think you're
Hmm.
familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it is sort of that, like, when you heal those child wounds, those child parts of yourself, they don't go away or
Mm-mm.
die or anything. They're actually just reintegrated in a more healthy way, and they get to do a different thing rather than like having a tantrum or, crying and freaking out. They get to just go run and play in the forest and
Yeah.
be this, more joyful part of yourself that you missed having as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that work, and yeah, exactly. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about death.
Okay.
All the things, like real, I shouldn't say that so joyfully. I'm sorry. That actually like feels quite disrespectful, what I just did, um to really honoring that space of transitioning out of life and into whatever happens next.
Yeah. And I get that. I get joyful talking about the work because I'm so deeply passionate about it, and then will catch myself in that sometimes of it's like I don't find joy in others dying, but I find joy in helping others understand that process more or
Yeah.
find their own beliefs in it. Um, yeah, I am learning that, of course I chose this path and Um, people really close to me, some of the people the closest to me have severe death anxiety and fears of
Mm,
death. And so I am just recognizing that the more I step into this work, it feels like I also have these contracts to help support them in particular, and then hopefully many others. Um, it's unknown, right? And
yeah.
the more I study it, the less I know, which is kind of as anything goes. I always say that the more I know, the less I know. Um, I think a lot of people get caught up in the fear of what their death will do to those that they leave behind and the impact of that grief. That creates a lot of the anxiety or just the fear of what's on the other side. Um, and my desire is to support in many ways in that to help with grief. I think that plant medicine can be such a deep space holder for grief and helping people really navigate those spaces. And I have visions of that being part of this work. Um, and even for those who might have terminal diagnoses who are grappling with their own fears of death and having support pre that transition. Um, I see death in any way as a graduation. It's never an end or a completion, but a graduation into more and something new. And my Nana passed in 2020, and she left me so many little breadcrumbs and gifts to pull me even more so on this path. And um, walking through the grief of that loss was excruciating and still has its days and moments, and I imagine will continue to. Um, but she chose to quit treatment, and this was like the peak of COVID, and she didn't have any of that or anything, but just wanted to be home.
Yeah.
And so she spent her last 7 days at home, surrounded by her family, singing hymns and Elvis, which is what she spent a lot of her time in this earthly realm doing. And it just made me recognize like how far we've come from ritual and practice in death and how deeply I desire to bring that back. Really, it can be so cold and sterile in a hospital, or just
Yeah.
the soul exits and the body is immediately taken away, and there's so much honoring of the physical body too, as this contract that we've agreed to as it's carried our soul in this lifetime. And so, yeah, I feel deeply called to bringing more awareness to this, bringing more ceremony back to those spaces, um, helping be an advocate for those who are in those transitional places. And, families get so caught up in the sickening capitalistic funeral association that we exist within too.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a lot that I feel needs to change in that space. And so, um, yeah, I not like happy to do the work, but happy and joyful to create change in that space and lead it in a new way or return it to what it once was. Um, yeah, I think that death needs to be talked about more
Yeah.
in open spaces. It's something we avoid. We either avoid it or we try to escape it. And no one wants to talk about it often ever. And if we can bring it more to just even right the dinner table or with children, I've walked a lot of clients through, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but even myself and my sister, we lost grandparents really young too, and was really detrimental to my sister. She was extremely close to my papa, and there was no adults around to help a child navigate that
Yeah.
loss or grief because no one wanted to talk about it. And also the adults didn't know how to handle their own grief. And so, seeing the impact that had on her at 8 years old, and it really changed some trajectory for her and her path. And so also, I have desires to write some children's books to also help with that. I think it's so important to have those conversations from an early age and just death it's part of life. We're all, it's
Yeah.
inevitable for everybody. And so creating normalcy around it and keeping conversation alive around it is deeply important to me.
Yeah. I hope that you do that. I would, sign me up to help support her to pre-order your books already for kids, because I know that they would really honor everything about the process of transitioning from life into beyond or what's next, but that they would also be really honest. And I think
Mhm.
that, especially just since you said talking with kids about death, that feels so important to me. I think that's one of my things I really try to bring into my life, is to help people know that kids really can handle these conversations.
Mhm.
They can almost often hold them better than adults can.
Mhm.
And that, if you try to pretend or tell a child that, oh, they're just in heaven, let's not talk about that, that it's really giving them an incomplete picture.
Yeah.
And they know, they know that we're grieving, that we're processing, and that it isn't just this really simple little, oh, they're in a better place now, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's often the conversation because the adults are still that child who is
Mhm.
processing in that way as well, oftentimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can definitely handle those conversations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Death really, I think, came into my life at a pretty young age. Probably 4 or 5 years old, started having younger family members die, and
Mm.
just really not not having great conversations about that in my household or in my family, beyond kind of the things that I said. And I see now as an adult how that is still going on, and how
Mhm.
that's affecting my family, and when I think about a death doula and the beautiful work that they can do, I I see how I wish that my family would embrace that a little bit more,
Mm.
and have had that come in when I had an uncle pass away 2 years ago now. And just the the amount of conversations and healing and preparation that we could have done to really honor his last time, his last month or two on the earth before he left us.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel that pain and that hurt still, that my family's holding on to from not having had that. So
Yeah.
that's really just me saying, thank you for stepping into that role and for doing that brave work, because I know how needed it is to help
Mhm.
people figure out what to do with all of the complicated feelings that are coming up, especially knowing that someone is going to be dying soon.
Yeah. And there's so much, right? Because it's so often sidestepped or not talked about that even when it comes down to logistical things, right? Like
Yeah.
those conversations that are then having to be had in that state of chaos and grief, it's overwhelming. And I've personally experienced it and I've seen it time and time again too, where families can really fall apart
Hmm.
because no one, is grounded or in their body and able to even really make the decisions that are being asked of them at that time without preparation. So even part of the doula support is being that in between person, being an advocate for the person who's transitioning and also for the family. And it's like when you think of somebody who is preparing for birth, they are preparing. There's a lot of conversation in the 9 months leading up to it,
Yeah.
and what is the birth plan, and you know, from getting the nursery set up and having all of the things. And death is similar, but we don't do any sort of preparation for it
Yeah.
in that way. And so, yeah, part of that, having that extra person there or that doula support can bring ease. And to me, it then allows the family to be present with their feelings and maybe drop into some of those deeper conversations because all of that stuff is taken care of and it's not adding stress to the environment.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with a family or worked with anyone where there was a sudden death and, kind of doing post-death doula work with the family that's left behind?
Yeah, so I have and am currently working with some clients. The death was sudden and the work that we're doing is actually years past that time,
Mm.
but the impact of that um has been deep. And so I'm grateful to be in their spaces now and working with them in a more kind of different approach than talk therapy or things like that. And part of the work that I do is sometimes often connecting to those lost loved ones in different ways, and how they're really present with us still, and what is that experience, in continuing a relationship with them from where they're at based on your beliefs. And um yeah, I find when death is always hard, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's the loss of a pet or uh again, relationship or a loved one, whatever it might be. And when it happens unexpectedly, it's just a different way that it shows up, I think, for most people. Or, I think we all have an idea of, like, this is sort of how life flows, right? And we're born and we go through life and we die at an old age. And so I have found, right, like when a parent buries a child, or there's like a disruption to that order
Yeah.
that we kind of carry, those are also, deeply challenging and hard to grapple with and understand. So sudden, um, yeah, tragic losses and being stuck in that moment of freeze,
Hmm.
for who knows how long until you can move through that emotion of hearing that news and finding that out. But yeah, I think when it comes to grief and that process, everybody is different and it's never the same and it looks so different on everybody. And so just even having awareness around that as the individual of, like, my process doesn't have to look this way, can sometimes be relieving.
Yeah. Wow. So when you say that you sometimes connect to loved ones in a different way, is that where the Akashic Records comes in?
Yeah, in that space sometimes, even just sometimes in meditation, with clients that I'm working with, uh, and my Nana talks to me often and always, but it's been with, giving permission for her to come into my space. And yeah, in the Akashic Records, I will have clients, loved ones come in. Not always, it's not in a form of mediumship, but with messages or just support for where they're at and
Mhm.
what it is that they're asking about in that moment.
Cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
I just a quick story. I was shocked a couple months ago. I was working with a new client and we were processing, some grief around death of a parent, and the parent showed up, and
Mm,
I just got the picture and the image, and they were telling me what they wanted me to say to their child, an adult child, but telling me what messages they wanted to pass along. And hadn't had that happen before,
mhm,
and it's happened a few times since, and was was unexpected, but it was such a gift that I was able to give and to say, like, hey, it's not just that you're feeling, the loss and also recognizing the love that your dad had for you, but also I'm
mhm.
telling you he's here, and he's like,
Yeah.
Hey, I love you so much, kid.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, it's wild when it first happens, right? That sort of, I remember the first experience I had with that, and um, it's like such a deep honor to
Mhm.
be, right, the
Yeah.
connection point between that, and sometimes also challenging to deliver those messages depending on what's coming through. And I've been in that space too, and it's always like using your inner discernment of, is this person ready to hear this piece too, and also just like,
Yes.
it's coming through for a reason. But um yeah, I will say in my personal experience, my grandmother came through to someone in a similar sense. It was very unexpected, and um I had no idea how important that moment would be for me and my healing,
Mm.
and it was everything. um and I probably would have not ever actually even sought that out like through a medium or anything, but she made her way known and made it happen in her own way. So um thank you for that gift, and allowing that channel to be open in that way. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's really, as we all do our own work and grow and learn more about ourselves, I think it's just really cool what can open up
Mhm.
and what we can see in
Mhm.
ourselves and what we can see in others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you get into, like, how did you get onto this path where you're, you know, working with women, working with people, now working with families in processing their death and grief? So, where did little Morgan start along this journey?
Hmm. Um, it's never been just one thing, but it has been a continued listening of kind of go here, go here, go here, and deeply trusting. But that first started with me having to learn to trust myself and my intuition. So, um, in astrology, there's Saturn return at like 27 ish.
Yeah.
And it can be a moment in life where, like, if you're not on like a more aligned path, the universe can shake things up a bit. And it's
Mm.
exactly what happened. I always joke that it felt like the simulation just stopped and everything powered down around me. And it was like, this is not at all what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to be. And it was like, I had no other choice, it felt like, but to just listen. And so that was a catalyst to everything else. And from there, it's been first really taking time to cultivate that trust within myself and do my own work. So there was 4 years at least of solo traveling, learning, mentors, just being in my own energy and really recognizing how to listen to my
Yeah.
body, how to find safety, how to ground myself, like cultivating tools that have just been life changing for me. And then from there, everything has kind of snowballed and grown. And in human design, I'm a manifesting generator. So it's kind of always shifting and changing. But at the core of it, I just really deeply feel called to the death piece and bringing just awareness and conversation to that. And ultimately, it's led me to this inner standing within myself of my path will probably always be different and changing in some ways, but the core of it is working to support others and what it means to truly live
Hmm.
by playing and understanding in the world of death.
Yeah.
Because to me, in order to really embody in purpose and living fully, is to also die over and over and over and over and over again. And so that also gets to be in play, and it doesn't have to be always in suffering and when we're at like a rock bottom. And so there's a part of this to me that's just like it gets to be all of it. It's like
Yeah.
the spectrum of all of it, and living my life as an example of that, and then supporting others and finding what that looks like for them.
Yeah. And you are, I mean, I've said this so much, I'm on the verge of like gushing, but I actually really do mean it, because you have been that example for me from afar, and then
Hmm.
from having that time with you, of just really how to dive in and explore those dark and uncomfortable spaces, but also allowing yourself to just enjoy the moments
Hmm.
that you get in between the darkness,
Hmm.
or even in it.
Yeah.
So,
In it. Yeah, all of it.
yeah.
It's like it's always um yeah, I say it's like dancing in the shadows, and that's where like even the conversation of death, like
Mhm.
can we bring some fun around it? And maybe it's even somewhat laughable at some point that, yeah, we're all dying and it's part of our process. But what about
Yeah.
what we came here to do, which is to live this human experience? And sometimes that's the place that to me feels more like death, is to be here and not be living,
Yeah.
than actual dying.
Mm, yes.
Mm.
Yeah. I also need to call back to your, I hadn't, I have read some books that refer to Saturn returning and the Chiron return, and
Hmm.
those different stages of astrological change and transition in our life. But I had forgotten about the Saturn returns around age 27. And I will just say, I had a very similar moment at that age, where exactly how you described it, I could not go on living as I had been living before.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah, it was.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my brother's in his right now, and I keep trying to explain to him like it's part of the process, and this is all for you, I promise. But when you're in it, sometimes, I think when I sit with it still, it feels like if you've ever seen the Hunger Games, like the moment where the bow and arrow like shatters the arena that they're in, and
Yeah.
it just like that's what it felt like. It was just like,
Yes.
okay, this is not for you. So yeah, those moments are big tower moments and huge jumping off points for where you're at now, and I'm sure many others can resonate with that.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
So you are such a teacher and a guide. Who have been some people or some books or concepts that have really informed you and taught you along the way?
Hmm. I really deeply love the work that Joe Dispenza does, and
Mm,
he's been a huge teacher for me because my background is like biochemistry and science, and so sometimes that bridging of the gap, I really deeply appreciate it.
mhm,
And then uh, another mentor I work with who is just lovely, and she's also worked a lot under Joe, but her name's Gianna Romer, and she's an astrologist, and she's just, yeah, yummy. It's the best
mhm,
word I have for her, but she's taught me a lot in understanding just our bodies and regulation in that, and um speaking from a place of like authentic truth. I'm trying to think. Ram Dass, he's been
mhm.
deep in my studies this year with death stuff.
Yeah.
And I still really deeply admire his work for many other things too, but that's been somebody that I've deeply dove into in that. Um, and for business stuff, I love Natalia Benson. She's, I don't know,
Mm,
astrologer too, but I've worked with her, and I love her energy. And she was a huge support in just me getting my stuff up and going. Um, and yeah, I've worked with many different medicine teachers too, and different spaces, and that's been, I mean, if I could name Aya as my biggest mentor, teacher, and guide, I think I would certainly do that as well.
perfect. Great. Just grandmother Aya. Just boom. You can find her work anywhere in Peru, Brazil.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Just tap into that essence. She's available to teach.
Amazing. So, where can people find you then? Where can people come to work with you or get support from you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. My name is just Morgan Fava, and my website the same, morganfava.com. Um, Working on some new exciting things, and also just always have space for whatever that looks like and clients' needs.
Incredible. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, so much for the support that you've given me and
Mm,
for the work that I was able to do in working with you in the retreat space. So thank you for that. And thank
mm.
you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for creating this container and the work that you do and for saying yes. I mean, yeah, I always laugh at if anyone's seen the newest Hocus Pocus movie, but uh, Bette Midler says at the end, I am nothing without my sisters. And I just think that's so true. So
Mm,
thank you
beautiful.
for being that
Perfect.
in my life. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.